Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks again for joining us today. It's great to see you all. So as you know, my name is Kelly Ciriello. I'm the coordinator for the U.S. Biosphere Network, and I'm also the co-chair of the Champlain Adirondack Biosphere. So we are thrilled today to feature our third Biosphere Bites webinar. So today we have Kate Potter, the Executive Director from the Canadian Biosphere Reserves Association, who's going to be talking to us today about crossing boundaries, sharing insights and lessons from the Canadian Biosphere Reserves Association. So just as a reminder, this Biosphere Bites is part of our bi-weekly seminar series. So if for some reason you can't make it to one in the future, we do record and upload all the recordings from Biosphere Bites to our USBN YouTube channel, which I will put in the chat. So just a few bookkeeping things for today, just as a reminder, because we are on a regular Zoom call. So please keep yourself on mute for the duration of the call today, just to reduce background noise. The format of the presentation today will be about a 20-minute talk, and then we will allow for a Q&A, about a 10-minute Q&A at the end. We do encourage you, if you do have questions, you can certainly add them to the chat. I'm sure Kate will be happy to address them as soon as she's finished with the presentation. So, and I do invite you to add your name and potentially the biosphere location that you're logging in from today to the chat. So without further ado, Kate, thank you again for joining us today. We're honored to have you. I will turn it over to you to give an introduction of your presentation, tell us a little bit about you, and then get into the presentation itself. So thank you again, Kate.
Thanks, Kelly. You can see my screen okay? Okay. So I want to thank Kelly and the USBN for the invitation to come and chat today. I am the Executive Director for the National Association north of your border called the Canadian Biosphere Reserves Association. I have two logos down at the bottom. We are right in the middle of a rebranding. So we're going from the logo on the left to the logo on the right. So this presentation is a bit of a mishmash of a couple of different presentations. But once we get through this branding exercise, it will look a lot better. We're also refreshing our website. So I'll be sharing that information with Kelly, and she can share it with you where appropriate. I'll also point out that in my talk, I'm going to talk about the biospheres, the biosphere regions in Canada, but I'm also going to talk about the national organization because, and I'll get into this in a second, but really CBRA is the collective of the 19, right? It's the power of the network, and I'll mention that a few times. But there also is the organization, the worker bee behind the scenes, which is me, to kind of push some things forward. So I've already done it once already, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that in Canada, we refer to it as biosphere region. So usually I start documents and presentations with UNESCO designated biosphere reserve in Canada known as a biosphere region, and then continue on. So I will reference them that way. And with the rebranding and new bylaws that are coming, I'm hoping to have our name changed to the Canadian Biosphere Regions Association in the near future. So I'm going to give a few or a bit of an insight into what some of the Canadian Biosphere regions are doing, and then I'll move on to the national level. So for those of you who don't know, this is a map of all 19 in Canada. These are all very active sites. We have the oldest and smallest in Mont-Saint-Hilaire in Quebec, and we have the newest one, which is the Catsum House Sound in BC. We also, at least at the time that it was designated, we had the only Indigenous-led biosphere region in the world, which is up north there with Sachwe. But you can see by the varying levels and shapes and sizes of the yellow blobs on the screen, we vary, and I feel like I answer every question. We vary in size, capacity, location, context, etc. And I like to use the metaphor that we're all built with the same blueprint, but we're decorated. If you think of a house, we're all decorated somewhat differently depending on the needs. So behind the dots, behind the blobs on the map, there are 19 nonprofit organizations. Every biosphere region has an organization that's designated to the, or that is dedicated rather to the designation. All are nonprofits. Some are charities as well. Some are not. I would say about 2/3 are also charitable organizations. And there's a couple that are associated with another organization. So it's a bigger organization that houses the designation. but they all have at least programs that are designated specifically for the biosphere region designation. The 19 sites in Canada represent 2.8 million Canadians, and that's outdated, so it's even likely more now. We are hosted by 50 plus Indigenous nations and 50 plus municipalities. And I say hosted because, reconciliation and Indigenous perspectives is really important in Canada through the biosphere regions. And the hosts were there well before the biosphere region, and quite frankly, probably contributed significantly to why these places are so special now. The 19 sites also represent about 30,000 hours of volunteer time. So that's like private citizens committed to contributing to the mandate of individual biosphere regions. There's 11 national parks, so you can see that doesn't jive with 19. The remainder are either provincial parks or other legislated core zones. We have over 100 staff across the 19 organizations, and as a network, this was from 2021. It was $9 million coming into the site. Now that's not equitably divided among the 19 sites. Some have more, some have less, but that was just the money coming in that biosphere regions had fundraised in Canada. That's not including in-kind match or cash match dollars or other funding that's contributing to the work of the biosphere. So now I'd like to pivot a little bit and focus on a few kind of ideas or general categories of work that's happening. For climate work in Canada, there's a lot of monitoring and research being done by the biosphere regions. Just last month, there was a carbon sequestration report done by Manicouagan, which looked at the carbon sequestration potential of the biosphere region and the existing state, and we're hoping to ramp that up through all the 19 sites. There's also quite a number of regional climate action planning, so bringing together municipalities and First Nations to do regional climate action. And there's also Youth Climate Action Summit, which is happening in Frontenac, and I believe maybe it has origins in from the Champlain Biosphere in the States. Some of the other climate work that we're doing is nature-based solutions or restoration, looking at corridor connections and habitat resiliency, and active transportation, trying to reduce those carbon emissions. For some examples of biodiversity work, we specifically have some funding from a federal ministry called Environment and Climate Change Canada to look at the 30 by 30 target and how biosphere regions can contribute. That's around the other, what's called the other effective conservation measures. And we are not necessarily reporting OACMs into what will be recorded or reported on by Canada, but we are supporting the landowners in the biosphere regions. So that takes shape through either restoration projects, land acquisition, which is a minority, but some biosphere regions are doing that. So that's conservation land acquisition. Monitoring, research, kind of filling in the gaps of the reason why it might qualify, and then management planning and trying to incorporate biodiversity outcomes into municipal policy. And then some of the other work that's happening, and this is not an exhaustive list, but outside of the 30 by 30, which I believe in the US is the America the Beautiful initiative. And it's the Global Biodiversity Framework. It was Aichi Target 11. In Canada, it was Target 1. I believe with Montreal, it's now Target 3, but they're all virtually the same thing. So outside of that, we have species at risk, connectivity, landscape level planning work happening. And then through the economic growth or the sustainable development work, it's really focused on nature-based tourism. There's also academic and research-based tourism, and I'll maybe send some links out to Kelly that she can circulate, but there's a really cool station of Pishka, which is around research tourism, which I don't have time to get into today, but it's a really cool example if you're interested. And then there's also the reconciliation. So incorporating and supporting Indigenous-led conservation is really important in Canada for the biosphere regions. There is a collection of papers and videos on our website that you can look at. It gives you an idea of kind of where it started. It's been a challenging journey, identifying the truth and then following that up with action. And every site is at its own point in the journey, but we're trying to take steps forward. So I put this in, it's from an annual report. It's just looking at kind of where the breakdown of funding comes for the individual sites. There's some federal funding, provincial, private foundations, individuals that are contributing, and other, which is usually industry. And that was from two rather big sources. And again, this is kind of the average over the 19 sites for the percentages, but this is not equitably distributed. So then to talk a little bit about the National Association. So this is my board as of October of last year. We met in Charlevoix, which is in Quebec. To this particular meeting, we get together once a year when there's funding, and we were talking about CBRA's governance. It was a long 3 days talking about governance, but we got to the point where we needed to, which I'll talk about in a second. But this is part of the group. So CBRA, a lot of people within the network say CBRA is Kate, which I would say I'm kind of the worker bee. I do a lot of the activities because there's only me at CBRA. I don't have a bigger team. It's just one person. But I would argue that CBRA is actually the collective of the 19 sites. So it is the power and the power of the 19 sites working together, right? So individually, all of the sites are doing great work, but looking at the collective impact, the collective work, and the collective passion that the 19 sites bring in is far greater than the individual sites. So CBRA is an organization. It's a charitable nonprofit. It's an association. It's also a collective of the 19 sites, the network part. It's also a conversation starter. So I'm the dork in the front row of class, always putting your hand up to talk about biosphere regions in every and all meetings that I can get into. And it's also about promoting, right? So I always joke that I have like, I talk to the sites and then I go and I get to talk to other people about how cool the sites are, right? So I have a great job in that I get to listen and learn and hear about the passion and the work that's being done on the ground, and then I get to go tell other people. I mean, it's a pretty awesome job. So the next couple of slides I pulled from an old annual report, but just to showcase some of the work that CBRA is doing at the national level. And I will say that a number of years ago, kind of just as I was coming on board, CBRA went through a bit of an identity crisis, trying to figure out like what it should be doing as a national association. Should it be like a local biosphere amped up at the national level? And the end result was no, it should be acting as a national association. So advocacy, capacity building, knowledge sharing, all of that kind of stuff. So that's where we sit now. And CBRA supports the biosphere regions. What is that that metaphor? It's all the tide rises all boats, something to that effect. So we're trying to bring everyone up. So we have a national gathering, we have communities of practice, which include right now we have biodiversity, fundraising, and a board. Like the board itself is considered a community practice. We're also bringing on a climate change community practice, and that's a monthly meeting. We get together, we talk about whatever the particular theme is. The board meets a little bit less frequently, and then a monthly newsletter just with updates, ideas, new research, news, etc. We also are going through the governance review process to make sure that the organization is quick and nimble, able to respond to the needs, because I am working at the service of the 19 sites. It's not a top-down like biospheres, thou shalt do this. It's how can I help? What do you need? And I work towards those. So this is a pretty big milestone in CBRA's work. So we were able to receive funding for every site as well as CBRA for 2 years, and now it's been extended another 2 years to work on that biodiversity project that I talked about earlier. So every site is getting $230,000 per year. They're expected to match that 1-to-1, but that's either through cash and or in kind. And this has been a game changer for a lot of the sites who there was a couple who were still volunteer led. And with this funding, they've been able to hire their first full-time staff person. And then some of the other things that CBRA is doing to facilitate some of the thematic work is we worked with the USBN on the Climate Intern Program. We have another proposal in, hopefully, to further that. And I just received a funding proposal where we're going to be starting our climate community practice. And then CBRA also helped from the reconciliation side of things. We tried a national approach to reconciliation, and it was not successful, given the individual nature and the characteristics of so many different nations. CBRA decided to pivot and focus on supporting at the regional level. So that's, for example, like the prairie biospheres, the 4 of them, invited Indigenous people that were hosting their biosphere, and we got together on the land to talk and share and build relationships with each other, but also the land. And CBRA was supportive in kind of getting that started. And this is where CBRA's money comes from. Really, it's federal funds right now, a little bit of private foundation, and we're working to change that. The CBRA governance is kind of the boring stuff, but right now I have a board of 19 members, and it's a large board with a smaller kind of advisory executive committee. We are looking to change that to a general assembly with a smaller board and the executive committee, and the lawyers are drafting up the bylaws right now. So we can have a bit more, we don't need 19 people approving the budget and the work plan every time. We need 19 people or 19 organizations to contribute to the strategic direction of the organization. And then these are some, and I'll put these in links, but we work closely with the national parks in Canada, so Parks Canada where appropriate, the UNESCO research chairs, the USBN, and we're really working on developing the staff champions within each of the federal ministries, at least at the CBRA level, and then other national level organizations of like the national equivalent of what a local partnership might look like the municipality. I'm trying to establish a relationship with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities at the CBRA level. So my kind of vision of where I'd like CBRA to go, I'd like to have thematic leads. So I'd like to have in the future a national climate lead, a national biodiversity lead, so that the biosphere regions can go to that person for advice, for knowledge, for help and capacity to build out their programming. We still need to have networking opportunities, peer-to-peer learning and professional development. Right now, anyway, there's not kind of any professional development program for like biosphere region people. So I'd like to change that and continue the opportunity to share knowledge and have the people who are the experts within the network teach the people who are willing to learn. So that peer-to-peer learning is important. Of course, we need funding and various other things, but small steps forward to kind of building this bigger picture. Some of the key messages that we try and talk about biosphere regions in Canada is, I think quite often we get pigeonholed into this, like, we are the tree hugging hippies who want to do great work, and yet we are those things, but it negates the kind of the bigger picture of the work that we do. So we try and focus on the fact that we are working on all 4 of those pillars in all of our projects. We also try and focus on the return on investment. So not necessarily the amount that we are bringing in, but what we can do with that amount. We had someone ask like, okay, well, how much money do you need then from the federal government? And it's a kind of an odd, like sticky question. We didn't have a specific number or a specific request, but we were talking about what we could do with whatever money came in. So we're looking at leveraging any money coming in. So $1 in returns $2 to $5 of investment in that local region. It used to be copy and paste, and now I've been told it's called use and improve. So we're taking models, successful models in one biosphere region, and trying to scale that out across the network where appropriate. We're not mandating anyone, but we're trying to just really encourage that, like, you can start at step 3 because your colleagues have done all of the groundwork, and you can copy, use and improve, and implement that in your area where appropriate. We're also trying to promote the biosphere regions as local experts and service providers. So we're not coming to municipal governments looking for handouts. We are there with expertise and capacity that we can provide, and offering a service and deliverables in relation or as a result of the funding. And I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I strongly believe that we are stronger together, and we need to use and capitalize on the power of the network of 19 sites. And if you didn't notice, all the pictures of nature in my slides includes people and nature. So that's a huge message that we really try and push. So I've got like 2 minutes left. How can this help you? So lessons that we've learned along the way, we really need to focus on financial diversification, like CBRA is getting all its money from the federal government. That's not great. And we also need to focus on both the money right now that we have, but also the long-term sustainability. And through that, our successes that we've had is leveraging those successful models, really building the partnerships, showcasing ourselves as service providers, and starting those conversations. And then we have a number of assets that we use on a regular basis. It will be the website. Our website right now is not great, but I'd like it to be a resource for the biosphere regions to use, but then also for us to use when we're trying to connect with partners. We also have thematic briefs right now on biodiversity, climate action, tourism, sustainable development. So like there are 3 or 4 pages, and one has a connection to the international framework. The second part has like a connection to federal priorities, and the last one talks about local examples of Canadian biospheres, but you can take that model and use as appropriate. We also have a 2-minute national video, which was created by the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. It's a great resource. It talks about biosphere regions in Canada, but generally speaking, it talks really well about and very visually about what biosphere regions do. And then there's lots of presentations that I reuse over and over to talk about different themes and different aspects to different people. And I'm almost done. Hold on. Sorry, turn off my timer there. The biggest takeaways would be power of the network. You get kind of what you put in. So to contribute to the USBN or contributing to CBRA gets a better product out. I am only as useful as the input that my biosphere regions give to me. It has to be kind of small steps forward so that like incremental, I want to go straight to, the biggest pile there. But I've learned that along the way, it's kind of small steps that will get us there. And we all need to be singing to the same songbook, the same message, which we are working on in Canada. Thank you. That's it.
That was fantastic, Kate. Thank you so much for that informative presentation. I just want to say, Kate and the Canadian Biosphere Reserves Association has acted as a mentor to us at USBN as we're reinvigorating. So I just want to say a sincere thank you to Kate's leadership, but to CBRA overall for being a great model for us to follow. So congrats on the incredible work that you're doing and for continuing to inspire us and the World Network of Biospheres. So I'm keeping an eye on the time, and I do want to take a moment to open the floor up to some questions and some thoughts. So I saw some great chatter happening in the chat. So please feel free to take yourself off of mute. So Brian, go for it.
Just to Kate. Kate, I've never met you personally. From the time that I stepped in to be chair of the U.S. Biosphere Network, you have been a mentor, a guide, someone who has shared all your experiences, head and shoulders beyond where we were at that time. And I can't express enough gratitude for what you've done to assist the U.S. Biosphere Network. So thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thanks, Brian. And my affection comes back to the U.S. with Kelly and Brian, Cliff, everyone. It's been actually really rewarding to be able to connect with like Kelly, who is my counterpart. You know, to be able to have the same challenges, talk through things, brainstorm. Like it's been a wonderful partnership. I'm not sure why we didn't do it sooner.
That's great stuff. So thank you. So some other questions or comments or feedback for Kate. So again, I saw some great chatter happening in the chat there. So please feel free to add to the discussion. All right. Kate, I do have a quick question for you if others don't. So in terms of, I know that CBRA does a lot of international work and partnerships. I was wondering if you would be able to, in our last couple of minutes, just to kind of highlight some of the incredible work that you're doing within the world networks. I think that I've been inspired by kind of learning about how different sites are collaborating with, projects like Transect and other initiatives. So if you could just maybe touch on some of the work you're doing with the World Network, that'd be great.
Sure. So one thing that I didn't put in was the fact that in Canada we have CBRA and we also have the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. So it is like the Canadian presence of UNESCO, and it focuses not only on biosphere regions, but also geoparks, world heritage, a number creative cities, a number of different networks. We have been working to try and figure out kind of what our roles are at the national level. And we've kind of established the fact that I'm working obviously with the operational side to build operational capacity within the site, but then also to be working with the kind of staff level within the federal government. And they are working kind of with the political level and then the international community. So I hear a fair bit that, Canada is this like, it's an example of good work happening in the international world, but I'm actually not super connected in with that. But there is certain projects. So like the Transect project Kelly alluded to, that's through a UNESCO research chair. Her name is Maureen Reed through the University of Saskatchewan. And she has put together a project and it's looking at and I'd have to pull out the exact language, but it's like an interdisciplinary look at bioculturism, and it's using the biosphere regions as a model, but it's also connecting in Canada, South Africa, and Germany. And there's students that come from each of those countries to the other countries. There was a learning opportunity in Germany. This year, they're coming to Mount Arrowsmith in BC. So that's Canada, and then they'll be going to South Africa. So it's largely through the UNESCO research chairs that we're connected in, or through the commission who works with other commissions like the UK Commission to do these kind of international projects.
That's excellent. So thank you so much for that, Kate. So I just want to reiterate a deep, sincere thank you for carving out the time today and for sharing all of this knowledge and resources that's happening in CBRA. Again, we continue to be inspired by you and appreciate your openness and your willingness to share all of this. So I do want to take the time to invite everyone to our next Biosphere Bite. So it's 2 weeks from now. It's going to be on Wednesday, April 24th, the same Zoom link. Also at 12 o'clock, Annika Keeley from the Center for Large Landscape Conservation is going to be discussing IUCN's Ecological Connectivity Guidelines. So hope to see you there. Kate, thank you again so much. And until next time.